Dear friends, I put together a little recipe for you so you can win all your games with the black pieces. Yes, just like you heard. We're going to punish the most popular move in all of chess, which is the move e4, that is the king's pawn. All right, I've been looking over your comments, and a lot of you have asked me for a pretty strong opening with the black pieces, especially one that will surprise our opponent, and above all, that they play what you tell me, just to chill, because sometimes we go into really complicated variations and the game heads into lines you haven't explained at all, and I don't know how to continue. Well, don't worry, because here we're going to see that the defense is simple. You'll see with real data that it works, and on top of that, it's going to be easy for you to learn and easy to win with. We'll start with the Scandinavian defense. All right, we've seen it several times on the channel, right? How to play the Scandinavian defense, how to punish it with the white pieces, but don't worry, what I'm going to show you in this video is a brand new recipe, all right? You won't have seen it before. Great. Here, you can be sure they're going to capture this pawn, because if they don't, they're going to end up in a really bad position. For example, if they push this pawn, you'll continue, say with c5, you'll have central control, they won't be able to defend this pawn well, and we're going to attack it in the long run, right? For instance, if they develop over here, we'll pin, and then we'll play knight to c6. And I can assure you that this position is going to be extremely comfortable to play. So don't be afraid if they decide, for example, to push the pawn instead of capturing. But I can assure you that in 90-some% of cases, they're going to make the correct move, which is to capture this pawn. All right, chess teacher, how do I continue? With queen takes pawn or with knight to f6? All right, this game will continue with knight to f6, okay? Why? Because as I'm going to show you right here, look, 11 million players. They see they have an extra pawn and they're not going to let it go, all right? We've gone over this knight to c3 move on the channel before, right? The thing about this knight to c3 move, which isn't a good move but is still played a lot, is that we exchange in the center here and this queen ends up perfectly placed here. Unlike when this knight is here, they could chase our queen away, right? And so it's true that in that case, the queen would have to retreat. But in this situation, how are they going to chase her away? They can't. And when they develop this bishop, we're going to capture here. If they don't, we'll continue with e5, develop our bishops, and this position's super comfortable for us. But of course, what happens then? As you've seen in the diagram, a lot of times when they see they have an extra pawn, those greedy friends, they say, you know what? I'll defend it, and you won't be able to take it from me. They're going to do this to you 11 million times. It's not they'll do it 11 million times. They've already done it, so it's inevitable. They will, so watch your actions. The move c6, an amazing recipe. Let me explain. What are we threatening with the move c6? Very simple. If you don't take it, here they only have two options, either take or not take. If they don't take, we'll simply take ourselves. You see, they can't defend it because it's only protected by one piece, and we're attacking it with three. Knight to c3 doesn't work either. After the exchanges, we'll capture with the knight and then with the queen, and we'll be left with it. With material equality, and on top of that, with a much better position. Again, the queen is in the center, but also this pawn will be completely isolated, and it's going to end up in a really bad spot, and often it won't be able to be defended. So here, once again, you'll see that almost always they're going to capture this pawn. And now, what does Stitcher do? Well, we'll simply recapture with the knight. I've explained all the variations that lead up to this point, but you'll see that in the vast majority of your games, you'll reach this position because it's the most normal thing in the world. They've defended the extra pawn they had and now they've captured so they don't lose it. That's it. That's simply what happens. You'll see that in most of your games. You'll end up here. All right, here you see a backward pawn. They want to play d4, but they can't because if they do play it, and be careful, people have played it against me in fast games online, you simply capture it because you have it attacked with two pieces. But the most common thing is that, for example, they play knight to f3, develop a knight, and support the central point on d4, right? And so here, I'm sure a lot of you are thinking, I'd love to play this move, pinning the knight, then jumping in with my other knight, putting a lot of pressure. Well, all these plans are fine, but the strategy I'm bringing you is without a doubt much better. Let's be direct. We want to win the game right now. And I'll tell you in advance that many times you'll win in just 9 moves. How's that possible, Chesterton? Let's see. The idea here is that we're going to play the move e5. In this strategy, we're always creating threats. You might say, come on, don't give me that. What are you threatening right now? I don't see any threat. Well, the threat is brutal, and it's this. We want to play e4, kicking out this knight, and when it moves, watch out, because we've got some absolutely lethal attacks. You'll see it, because I'm going to show you, and that's exactly what you'll need to do in your own games. What's going on? That they can defend it, right? They can defend against this e5 attack, and they can do it simply with this move, d3. Let me tell you something. Against this e5 that you're going to play, the only move that holds up, and I'm not saying it wins, just that it holds up, is d3, okay? And first, I'm going to show you what happens if they don't do it, because that's how you should punish it, and then how you should react if they play d3. Don't worry, you'll still end up in a great position. For example, the most common move here, along with d3, is knight to c3. They think they're defending this square, developing a piece, but they're really not doing anything because we can still advance since our knight is defending this square. And what happens there? We're going to do it, right? Of course, if they don't defend it, it's as simple as playing e4. You see how straightforward it is? You'll probably have to watch this video several times for it to really stick in your head, but that's okay. Everyone at their own pace. Where's that knight going to go? Well, obviously, it's not going to go backwards. It can't jump forward because we've got everything well covered, and the most common move by far is for it to go to the g5 square. In fact, they've always come to the g5 square because from there they attack my pawn with two pieces. And this might sound familiar to some of you who like to play, for example, the d4 e5 gambit, right? The Budapest gambit. Why is that? Because this is typical now, isn't it? It's true that we can defend it, but they can keep attacking it. So what do? I'm getting to a point where they're attacking this pawn with two knights, and I only have it defended with one. But don't worry, we're going to defend it with the bishop. And if they don't do anything right now, you might say, come on, Chestachero, again, here. They have a lot of options, and this is what I don't like about opening videos. There are so many options that they never make the right one against me. Well, here they can only do one thing. They can only keep attacking this pawn, because if they allow themselves the luxury of doing anything else, like developing the bishop, we'll simply push the pawn forward, threaten the knight, it'll have to go to h3, we'll trade it off, double their pawns, and this position would be a complete disaster for the white pieces. So here, no matter what, they have to play actively and come to attack this pawn for the third time. One or two pieces are attacking it and two are defending it. What are the only two moves that attack this pawn? Obviously, queen to e2 and queen to c2. It wouldn't be possible with the bishop, obviously, and d3 is impossible at this moment either, because we would simply capture the pawn and it would really be free, since it's very well defended by our pawn. Sorry, by our bishop and our queen. So the only way they have is queen to e2 and queen to c2. We're going to punish both with the same move. For example, queen to e2, and we're going to play the brutal knight to d4. I assure you, at this point, you've already completely won. Let me explain. If they try to keep attacking the pawn here, it's simply knight to c2, check, and I take the queen. And be careful, I might take your rook too. So here, the only way to avoid the fork is to go back to d1. You get me, right? Because I told you it was exactly the same to go to e2 as the c2. Because here we would do the same thing and they'd have to go back to d1, and in this position, what then? Well, we've simply already won the game. We kick out this knight. Remember this plan, right? And once we kick it out, where does it have to go? To h3, there's no other option. We trade it off, and right now I'll show you why this was so dangerous. If earlier they hadn't managed to trade, or rather, if they let us play h6 and the knight had to retreat, you'll see that the squares left weak can be taken advantage of in a brutal way. For example, let me give you an example here. Here, knight to f3 check would win the game. What does the king have to go? He can simply go to e2, and then queen to d3 is checkmate. This is just one example. Remember this well. We attack the pawn and they defend it. They don't want to give it up. And we play c6. That's the recipe, right? Now, if they don't want to lose the pawn, then the only way is to capture here. We capture with the knight, and now they can make a lot of moves, but our idea is to play e5, right? The most popular move, without a doubt, is knight to f3. Why? Because otherwise they'll fall way behind in development. Of course, it's possible to make other moves, like, I don't know, just making something up, knight to c3, but then we're going to play e5 anyway. Even if that knight isn't there, although most likely here they'll do it again, we'd still be in the same situation as before, right? Because this bishop can't be developed, neither can this one, and if not, they play d3, which is exactly what we're going to look at now. Perfect. So here we're going to play e5, but Chestature, you just told me that if they play any move, I push this e4 and I'm winning. But what happens if they play d3, which is the only move that holds on? Just a little bit? You just told me yourself. Well then, do you want me to tell you the surprise now or not? We're going to play e4 anyway. And watch out, watch out, watch out, because they have to play very precisely not to lose on the spot. Let me explain. Here, what are we going to keep doing? Or rather, what are they going to play in response? Well, they have two options: capture the pawn or not capture it, right? Obviously, maybe not capturing the pawn or moving the knight would be extremely dangerous. First, because here, we would win a pawn, right? We simply have it defended by the queen. And if they come forward, for example, then we could just continue, say, with bishop to f5. And this position is super strong. We're putting a lot of pressure here, right? But, well, that's not usually what they'll do. Whenever I've advanced, at least in my experience, they've always captured the pawn. They have two extra pawns for now. Right now, they have two extra pawns temporarily, but don't worry, okay? And on top of that, they want to trade queens with us. You already know that when you have extra material, it's good to trade queens. But in this case, we have an ace up our sleeve. In fact, we want to trade queens. Remember this well. Why? Because now we're going to win back this pawn. Now we're only down one pawn, just one, and that's it. But of course, the difference in activity is huge. We're threatening a fork, and here there's only one move that saves them, which is bishop to e3. For example, if they try to come and defend with the king, the fork, then we could continue, for example, with bishop to f5. And honestly, our position is so good that the engine's already evaluated as -2. That is, if you reach this position, you'll have a clear advantage over your opponent. But normally, they'll play the correct move, bishop to e3, developing a piece and stopping the fork. So how should we continue, chess friends? Well, in the same way, bishop to f5. In this line where we trade queens, our play will be superior to our opponents, and it's going to be very straightforward. Our only plan is going to be to castle long. That's exactly why I play this bishop to f5. Look at how simple this recipe is. When we go to castle long, we'll place the rook on the semi-open file, and as a result, we'll be in a much better position. If they develop this knight to c3, we'll change the pawn structure, castle long, and the advantage will be overwhelming. If they develop the knight through d2, which is a bit better, our plan is still the same. We're going to castle long. We're going to put on more pressure. The knight puts pressure, the rook puts pressure too. This knight can jump in many situations, and honestly, this game is going to be won. For example, I'm going to show you a game that actually happened with this variation. Black castled long and pinned the king here, so white tried to move it, and just look at how easily the game ended. Knight takes knight, exchanging this knight here. It might not be a good idea to capture with the bishop, because then they'd stop defending this really important diagonal, and we could bring in the other bishop, then the other rook, and that would be very beneficial for us. So in the game, the capture was made with the knight, but then the player with the black pieces simply came to attack with this knight over here. Notice that now they're attacking these really weak points, thanks to our bishop, our knight, and also our rook all working together, and at this point, there's really nothing they can do anymore. I'll show you. In the game, for example, they took this pawn, but it doesn't matter what they do because our pressure is lethal. We attack the rook, a rook that has to move, and now the other piece simply comes in. Look at how all the pieces are working in our favor. This knight seems like it can't be saved anymore, so it has to retreat, and now all our firepower comes in. Look at this. This knight is deep in enemy territory, and at any moment can jump and create a discovered attack. The bishops are real killing machines, and both rooks are in a central position. Couldn't be better. And all this in exchange for just one pawn. And look at how our opponent's pieces are. They can't do a thing. In the game, it ended like this. Look, the bishop was driven out, and simply check with the bishop. And right here, white resigned. Why? Because when the king moves, there are probably several ways to win. Literally, the simplest is to create a discovered attack with the bishop, because we have the rook behind, right? So here, well, really anyone could play however they want. For example, here you could play bishop to g5, check, and the king has to move, right? This is just an example to show you that even if your opponent doesn't do exactly what we studied, the game will still go in our favor. So the only thing you need to remember is to play that c6 and then the plan to push with e5. And no matter how much they try to stop it, we're going to play e5 anyway. I recommend you watch this video again, especially if your rating's under 1500 ELO. Study it well, because if you play this, I assure you your victories will be huge since people lose in just a few moves with the white pieces. They just don't know how to defend. And I hope you really enjoyed this video. Leave a big like if you liked it. If you want, you can subscribe to the free newsletter where every Sunday I send out information, this Sunday included. We're going to analyze the game by Faustino Oro that's spectacular, and we're going to learn a lot. From here, everyone can study whatever they want. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Leave a big like. Goodbye.